At BAM, we were on a path to glory, and no one was going to stop us. As I declared on many occasions during my 36-year run to our board, staff, artists, audience, and anyone else who crossed my path, BAM was not a job, but a crusade. That was my mantra. I adhered to the definition of crusade as, quote, an energetic and organized campaign concerning a social, political, or religious issue. For me, BAM was all three.
I'm Susan Spurlock, Executive Director of Ford Hall Forum at Suffolk University. And I'd like to welcome you here in the audience at this beautiful, historic, modern theater, and those who are in our streaming audience to this evening's program, Creating Success Through Building a Diverse Arts Community. Ford Hall Forum is America's oldest free public lecture series, and how fitting is it that we honor the forum's storied history as we bring to the podium Karen Brooks Hopkins, President Emerita of the Brooklyn Academy of Music, America's oldest performing arts center. This evening we celebrate Karen upon the publication of her new memoir, BAM, and Then It Hit Me, which takes the reader on a funny, sentimental, and informative journey. Encompassing her extraordinary 36-year career at BAM. You'll hear more about Karen shortly. In March, Ford Hall Forum partnered with Punctuate 4 on a terrific production here at the Modern, and it was wonderful to work with you again, my dearest Miriam, and Kat, and Linda, and Patricia. I'd also like to recognize our longtime production partner, GBH Forum Network, and the Lowell Institute, who makes programs like this possible. It is now my pleasure to introduce Kelvin Dinkins Jr., the new Executive Director of the American Repertory Theater, ART, at Harvard University. Kelvin joins the ART and Harvard community following 5 years as the Assistant Dean and Assistant Professor Adjunct in Theater Management at the David Geffen School of Drama at Yale University and the General Manager of the Yale Repertory Theater. Kelvin developed his passion for theater management and producing while an undergraduate at Princeton University, where he received his A.B. degree in English and a certificate in theater and dance from the Lewis Center for the Arts. He earned his MFA in theater management and producing from Columbia University's School of Fine Arts. Kelvin has long been a champion of diversity, leadership, equity, and BIPOC leadership in the arts and theater industry. Kelvin's full bio can be found in your program. Kelvin, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and welcome to Boston.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Susan, for that wonderful introduction. I join you today following my first couple of weeks as a resident in Cambridge and my first week on the job as Executive Director at ART. In my first week, I completed hiring of my first staff member, experienced our first outdoor gala on Monday, and on Tuesday I attended a full board retreat. Today is Thursday, I think. And I have to say that the analogy of drinking from a fire hose cannot be used enough. I've been energized by this opportunity to join ART and Harvard at this pivotal moment as we are deeply committed to centering our values of anti-racism and regenerative practice, but also our deep investment in civic engagement as we prepare for our new home in Alston. The moment we all find ourselves in right now collectively as cultural stewards is a reminder for the ongoing need for forward thinking and leadership that is both adaptive and aspirational. With that said, I am honored to be joining the Cambridge and Greater Boston communities tonight to speak about such a leader, as I have been given the distinct pleasure and privilege this evening to introduce tonight's guest, Karen Brooks Hopkins. As was said, Karen is the President Emerita of the Brooklyn Academy of Music, where she worked for 36 years, serving 16 as its president before retiring in 2015. As president, Karen oversaw the institution's 230-plus full-time staff and its multiple theaters and cinemas, of which I've experienced 2 productions there, Karen, of Krapp's Last Tape and The Rhinoceros, which were pivotal experiences for me as a young, aspiring theater manager in New York City. To name just a few of Karen's many achievements throughout her career, Karen was the inaugural senior fellow at the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, where her research focused on the community impact of anchor cultural institutions. She has served as the chair of the Cultural Institutions Group, been a member of the Mayor's Cultural Affairs Advisory Commission, the New York State Board of Regents, and she was named one of the 50 most powerful women in New York by Crain's New York Business. Among the many honors BAM received during her tenure is a 2013 National Medal of Arts, presented to Karen by President Obama at the White House in 2014. Karen is a graduate of the University of Maryland, and she received her MFA from George Washington University in Washington, D.C. She has received honorary degrees from St. Francis College, Pratt Institute, Long Island University, and a prestigious doctorate of laws from my alma mater, Columbia University. Aside from her many distinctions, Karen's continued leadership and impact on the arts field continues with her latest contribution to the playbooks of many industry leaders, professionals, and audiences, BAM, and Then It Hit Me. Karen's continued commitment to diversity and advocacy for championing work for community building is evident in her words and a great reflection of the embodiment of servant leadership that I aspire to. Following her unprecedented tenure at BAM, Karen has continued to advocate for responsible cultural stewardship by promoting greater inclusion as not only a good business decision, but a humane one. I had the privilege of attending Karen's talk at the Yale School of Management in April on the role of arts organizations in anchoring community economic development. And I distinctly remember thinking, 1, I have to meet this woman, and 2, I have got to get Karen to talk to more boards of governors because this work, this analysis, is essential to our collective understanding in our governance structures and in the field. Imagine my surprise when I shook Karen's hand and she said to me, "I've heard a lot about you." It is at this moment that Karen told me about tonight's event, and I didn't hesitate when she asked me to join her here. Karen, I continue to be inspired by your work and your leadership and your legacy, which will no doubt continue to inspire generations of performing arts leaders and institutions. Thank you for your service to the performing arts field and for reminding us that even in retirement, the work is never done. It is my pleasure to welcome to the stage Karen Brooks Hopkins.
Thank you so much, Kelvin, for that sort of remarkable introduction. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Miriam. And I'd also like to thank the Onassis Foundation, which has been so supportive to my book tour. And I'm grateful to all of you for being here tonight. It means a lot to me. The tour has been so much fun. I've had such a great time getting out and talking to people about the arts. So I'm going to start, let's see. I think you're going to give me a slide of, this is exactly what I wanted. Thank you. The Brooklyn Academy of Music, I'm going to introduce it to you, is America's oldest performing arts center. It opened its doors in 1861 in Brooklyn Heights during the American Civil War. Even First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln was in the audience that night. Every great performer of the day graced that stage until the building burned to the ground in 1903. But out of the ashes, a committee of 400 citizens of Brooklyn stepped forward and raised money to erect a new academy in Fort Greene, which opened in 1908. That building has been the center of the Brooklyn Cultural District until today. For over 100 years and several memorable events later, such as when a young Rudolf Nureyev defected from the Soviet Union and made his American debut at BAM, or when Martha Graham performed as a dancer for the last time on the BAM stage, or when every presidential candidate pre-television made a campaign stop at BAM, and so on and so on. BAM has been an arts mecca that tells a story of Brooklyn history, New York City history, and American history. So to quickly review, BAM now has 4 buildings that you can see on the slide. The original structure, where is it? In this building here, that includes a 2,000-seat opera house, a large, open, flexible space that sits 350, 2 rehearsal studios, and 4 movie theaters. Then, about a block away, is the BAM Harvey Theater, which has approximately 800 seats, and also is the home of the Rudin Family Gallery. The BAM Fisher, right around the corner from the Opera House, is home to the 250-seat Fishman space, as well as the 100-seat Hillman Studio. And now the BAM Karen, under construction up there, will house the BAM Archive, more screens, and open studios. The BAM campus, as I noted before, is at the center of a new Brooklyn cultural district that has 9 institutions at its core, ranging from 200 on the northern border at Brick to 17,000 on the southern border at the Barclays Sports and Entertainment Arena. How this all came to pass is an amazing story of many people, enormous determination and perseverance, and a shining, unflappable commitment to the arts by the City of New York, the Borough of Brooklyn, private donors, and a committed and energetic staff and audience. In this context, now that I've introduced you to BAM, I will present a short reading from the opening of the book, which finds me, a 29-year-old theater-loving woman from Baltimore, in New York and at BAM, where my real life begins. I am a person of singular focus and resolve. For much of my adult life, I achieved what I call the rule of one. One son, one job, one boss, one house, one brother, who actually is here tonight, one ex-husband, and one 22-year relationship. My professional life has always been all-consuming, so I've tried, out of necessity, to keep everything else as simple and streamlined as possible. For 36 years, 1979 to 2015, almost without fail, I woke up every morning at 6 a.m. and rode 5 miles on my exercise bike. While riding, I read a handful of newspapers and magazines, scanning the stories for leads and inspiration, making notations in the margins, which always came out wavy and incoherent because of the bike, necessitating translation by one of my loyal assistants. After the workout, I showered, got dressed, and performed my daily ritual of looking in the mirror, clenching my fists, and saying out loud, "Good morning, Karen. Today you will raise $1 million." Then I went to work, moving methodically through countless meetings and events, which often stretched late into the night, never losing sight of the overall objective. At BAM, we were on a path to glory, and no one was going to stop us. As I declared on many occasions during my 36-year run to our board, staff, artists, audience, and anyone else who crossed my path, BAM was not a job, but a crusade. That was my mantra. I adhered to the definition of crusade as, quote, an energetic and organized campaign concerning a social, political, or religious issue. For me, BAM was all 3. My story can be summed up as follows. At the age of 29, I interviewed for a position in the development office at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. There, I met Harvey Lichtenstein, BAM's president and executive producer, for the first time in the dark, then decaying opera house at 30 Lafayette Avenue. It was there that he shared his expansive vision for BAM, recounting how far the institution had come since he arrived in 1967 and reflecting on what it could one day be. As I sat across from him listening to him talk, he fixed his penetrating eyes on my face, leaning forward silently, trying to determine if I had what it took to join the team. Then he leaned again in his chair and said in his distinct and gravelly voice, "Look, Karen, I need someone who can work like hell." Without missing a beat, I leaned forward and replied, "I get it. I'm your gal." "You're hired," he forcefully responded. We stood and shook hands, and that was the moment that everything converged. BAM became my home, my universe, everything. I worked there tirelessly for nearly 4 decades, eventually ascending to the presidency, helping to raise hundreds of millions of dollars for the institution while it became one of the most significant cultural centers in the world. It was clear right from the beginning that we would never have enough money to even be a second-rate Lincoln Center. So we decided to be a first-rate BAM. We doubled down on Brooklyn and helped lead the transformation of the borough from Manhattan wannabe to the coolest neighborhood on the planet. We embraced an adventurous program of diverse and contemporary work in all disciplines that you couldn't find anywhere else in the city. And finally, we shaped our marketing and fundraising strategies to feel like and align with the energy and spirit of the programs. The whole enterprise spoke in one clear, unified voice, the BAM voice. This book features personal stories and raw reflections, tales of glamour and of grit, as I look back with wonder, pride, and occasional regret upon my career, and I reflect on the near misses, the twists of fate, the total failures, the great triumphs, and the personal sacrifices I made along the way. And over all these years, my faith in the arts as a force for positive transformation has never wavered. Simply put, a robust cultural presence can deliver the goods 365 days a year to every individual and their community. The arts inspire love of learning, bring people together, house our greatest treasures in our most iconic buildings. The arts generate tourism and discovery of new and different places, different people, and their heritage. And after all is said and done, art is the only thing that endures from generation to generation to generation. So now, having just read to you from the book, I am going to introduce Miriam Sear, who will serve as the moderator in conversation with me this evening. Miriam has had a successful career as an actress, author, and director. In addition to serving as artistic director of the Massachusetts-based company Punctuate 4 Productions, she directed the play Reparations by James Sheldon last summer at Gloucester Stage, where she was named Best Director by Broadway World. She also has just recently finished shooting a new film, Point Noir, where she plays the lead role, and on top of all that, has a history in many different fields, starring opposite Al Pacino as Salome, and authoring a critically acclaimed book called Letters to a Portuguese Nun. I have, and this is the most important part, known and loved Miriam for well over a decade, maybe even 20 years. Miriam, please join me on the stage. Thank you. So we try to do things in a really interesting way. Everybody here sitting in this audience knows, for example, the great songwriter and singer Paul Simon. So we basically stalked Paul Simon for 9 years. We wanted him to do a program at BAM. He had expressed some interest, then he didn't want to do it, then he did want to do it. These things take a long time. So over this period of 9 years, we worked to try to get him to come. And finally it happened. And you know, it's funny, like if you work in the world of opera, you plan what you're doing like years in advance. Everything has to be organized at least 2 to 3 years in advance. With rock and roll, it's the complete opposite. So finally, I spoke to Paul, I think it was in December, and he said, okay, let's do it in April. So you get no time, you just have to be able to pull the trigger and say yes. But rather than doing a kind of a one-off greatest hits type of thing, we said, here's a guy with an amazing 50-year career of writing the most incredible songs, all different kinds with all different kinds of influences. Let's do a month of Paul Simon concerts rather than just a one-off. And so what we did was, we did a concert version of his failed Broadway show, Songs from the Cape Man, and we wanted to liberate the brilliant music from the failure that was the show. And the music itself, if you don't know it, go out and listen to this album right away. It's amazing. So we did several concerts of that. Then we did Under African Skies, where we did all the international influenced music, the South African stuff that you hear in Graceland, Rhythm of the Saints, the Brazilian work. We brought artists from all over the world to perform with him. And then we did another set called American Tunes, and it was all the Garfunkel stuff. We also had some of the films where he had written the score, like the famous Mrs. Robinson. We had talks. So we tried to encourage people to attend these concerts the way they would a film festival. Not just come to one, come to all of them and experience in depth what a 50-year career was like in pop music. So that's one example of the way that we tried to program at BAM. Another one that is kind of, there are really 3 strands of content in the book. Artists and celebrities, like I'm talking about now, fundraising and leadership, and all the crazy fundraising stories and things we did in order to get all these schemes to raise money.
Plus a recipe for fundraising, so
And
must buy.
yeah, a lot of talk about the steps of an annual campaign. And then the discussion that Kelvin really referred to that I did at Yale is about building successful creative communities powered by the arts. So right now we're in the artistic piece of the conversation. And the other story that I'll tell is about Ingmar Bergman. So you all know the great films of Ingmar Bergman. BAM did all of his stage work in New York. So we probably presented 10 productions by Bergman. They were all basically in Swedish, and we did them with simultaneous translation. Every other international director allowed us to do surtitles, but not Bergman. He insisted on simultaneous translation. Anyway, long story short, we decided to create a festival of his work. So here's another example of going deep. The films were shown at Lincoln Center. BAM did the theatrical works. We published a book, Ingmar Bergman, An Artist's Journey. There was a weekend of cinematography with Sven Nykvist, his great cinematographer. There were talks, there were opera scripts that we showed at the Performing Arts Library in New York. We did like 10 different things. But the way that we got to know him was actually the best part of the story. Ingmar Bergman had created a production of Hamlet, and it had some great actors in it. Pernilla August, who you all know, who played Shmi Skywalker in the Star Wars films. There was many different people that were in these productions. Peter Stormare played Hamlet. There was great Swedish actors that when you watch these films, you see the same actors over and over again. So Harvey, my boss, as you just heard before, was quite a character. And he heard that there was a Bergman production of Hamlet that was coming to New York, that a bank was gifting this production as part of some anniversary they were doing, but that it was 4 hours long in Swedish. And at that time, he wanted it to be done with no simultaneous translation. So Harvey said, okay, we're doing it. And I said, this time you've really completely gone crazy. Who's going to sit through 4 hours in Swedish with no translation? He said, it's a great production. Don't worry about it. The audience knows the play. So, and he was right. We sold out 10 performances of the Opera House, and there were 2,000 seats in that Opera House, and we sold them out because the audience knew the play, and they were curious.
You have to tell the story of when you flew to Sweden to meet Ingmar Bergman in person, because she had, as a fundraiser, come up with an extraordinary opportunity.
So there was this giant fest. So we did these. So we started with Hamlet, and then we built this relationship with Bergman, and we had several different plays that we did until finally we came up with the idea of doing this festival. And this festival was expensive. You know, we were bringing all these shows, we were bringing all the films, a lot of things were happening. So we were raising money from every Swedish source that you could possibly imagine. I mean, I know them all now, Skanska, Skandia, Volvo, I mean, you know, every single one, some that you've heard of and some that you haven't. But the big one, the great one, was when Vin and Spirit, the makers of Absolute Vodka, said they would support the whole festival. But there was one caveat. They wanted it to be called Absolute Bergman. So I flew to Stockholm. I used to say it was my home away from home because I was flying back and forth so often dealing with it. And I met the great man, and he was 80 years old at the time. But even then, you know, you could tell like why this guy had 5 wives. You know, he was just kind of charismatic and handsome and fabulous.
Not all at once.
Not all at once. And I said to him, I was a little nervous, you know, and I said, well, Mr. Bergman, we have this amazing opportunity. We've raised all this money. This has happened. That has happened. And now Absolute will sponsor the whole festival. You know, it's hard to raise a lot of this money, and they want to do it, but they want to call it Absolute Bergman. What do you think? And he looked at me and he went, absolutely not. So, and then he smiled, and it was, you know, and he did it with a twinkle in his eye. So then I had to go back and deal with Absolute, and we ended up calling it the Ingmar Bergman Festival, sponsored by Absolute, or something that was not half as interesting. Ended up getting less money, so I had to run around and raise more. But that is a typical story from like the world of fundraising and dealing with artists and donors and trying to get them to meet and find happiness together, which is not always the case.
So before we get to this lunch, which I want you to tell the story of, one thing you talk about the book, and I'd love you to tell us a little bit about that, is Princess Diana coming over, because you talk about it. It was a business, and what do you mean by that?
I said, Her Royal Highness, not a person, but an industry. And in fact, Peter Karzasti, who was our director of press, is here tonight and ran that gala and handled all the press. And so Peter has some additional stories that he swears I left out of the book. But let me tell you something. This book is 300 pages long. It has a lot of pictures, so don't be intimidated by that number of pages. And everyone that I meet who knows BAM comes up and says, how could you have left this out? How could you have left that out? I've said, by God, like at a certain point you have to stop. But the Princess Diana story was quite remarkable. We had decided to launch an opera program. And as I said before, opera is very expensive. I used to tell Harvey that you lose more money in opera by intermission than you do in an entire season of theater. It is really expensive. They can't sing every night, but you still have to pay people to be in hotels. You know, it's very complicated. Yeah. So we were having this opera initiative, and we decided to bring a production of Verdi's Falstaff that was, the Welsh National Opera was performing it, and a German director named Peter Stein was directing it. And it was a very large cast, tons of costumes, everything. So I was talking to the general director of the opera company, and I said, wow, this show is expensive. I said, we need to like do a major gala or something. I said, can you get the Queen? And he said to me, I can do better. I said, yeah? He said, Princess Diana. And I went, do it. So he went to the court of St. James. He made the ask. It turned out that Princess Diana was the patron of the Welsh National Opera. Anyway, there are a lot of stories about this in the book. I'll just tell you a couple. So she agreed to come. And then the whole thing was like a massive effort of hundreds of different people. First, they do what is called the recce. And this is a reconnaissance tour where they send over security, logistics, like 50 people showed up at BAM to mark the course of everywhere she goes, everything she does, what happens, how you address her, how you curtsy, how you say mum. You never call her Diana, you call her Your Royal Highness, or you call her mum. Those are the things that you have to know. There was a lot of preparation. Peter had to deal with a giant press corps that we had to kind of keep penned in with their cameras because you're only allowed to photograph her at certain times. You may not know this, but you cannot photograph a princess when she's eating. This is forbidden. So there are all these different things. So then you can imagine it's the big night. By now, we had all completely forgotten that there was an opera going on. We were only interested in what was happening with Her Royal Highness. So we got People magazine. Diana was on the cover of People magazine 20 times. They had photographed her more than any other woman in the history of the magazine. So when they heard that she was coming to BAM, they wanted to sponsor it. This was great news for us because it was a lot of money. And there was the moment of introduction went like this. The audience comes in. It's 1986, I think. Nine. Thank you, Peter. It's 1989, and it's New York. Everyone is, it's black tie, of course, 2,000 seats in the Opera House. Everyone is wearing black. The men are all in black tie. It's New York. The women are all wearing black. We have the night begins. You hear the crowd stands. They play Star Spangled Banner. We had the box the royal box where she would be coming in was decorated with all kinds of greenery and flowers. Star Spangled plays. The orchestra then strikes up to play God Save the Queen. Everyone is standing. Everyone's wearing black. She enters wearing white. A gasp goes up from the crowd. Everyone is thrilled. There's a princess, and all of New York was taken with her glamour and her beauty and how exciting the night was. And then things happened from there. So there's a million stories about all of this in the book. Changing, we kept, every moment was a fundraising moment. So we had some little girls who gave her flowers. We raised money for the flower moment. We had her box. We kept changing the people that sat with her in the box. Every time there was an act break, that was another fundraising moment. Then there was her table at dinner, where I had this table, and then the borough president of Brooklyn decided he was tired. He and his wife have had enough. They went home, and there was 2 empty seats at the table. It was an international incident, and we had to fill in. Luckily, the borough president of Manhattan, David Dinkins, was at another table. We yanked him off of his table. We moved him over to that table. Things were happening all night long, but it was a great night. We raised $1 million in one night, and the next day, her picture and Harvey's picture and BAM was on the cover of every newspaper in the city. So it really was an event that crossed us over. It made people really pay attention to BAM and Brooklyn. Can I tell one more quick Princess Di story?
Quick.
Okay. So the other thing that happened was while we were doing the seating, and we were doing the seating night after night, while we were doing the seating, we got word that CBS News was going to do a special on Princess Diana coming to Brooklyn. This was her first official visit. So we went out, we bought one of those little TVs because obviously this was before all the streaming and everything that you could do, and we had it sitting in the room with us. And as the CBS, this is CBS News, Dan Rather reporting, tonight we have Princess Diana coming to New York City. And where is she going? Brooklyn. And then there were pictures of people lying in the street, garbage everywhere. We were completely freaked out. It was a total, we were so upset. It was our big night. And certainly no one would say that about Brooklyn now. And what could we do to take our revenge? There was not much, but CBS had bought a table to the gala. And we pushed their seats all the way to the back, right near the bathroom. It was the only way we could say, take that, Dan Rather. And that was how we resolved the situation.
So very quickly, because there's an excerpt in the book I would love you to read from, which is about Mr. Albee, a favorite. Just quickly, what was this very successful lunch?
It was a lunch with the Mellon Foundation way before I had my fellowship there, where I went and met the new person at the time who was giving away the money for the arts. And during the lunch, we talked, and I talked about opera and just how miserable it was to try to raise money for it and how difficult it was. And she said to me, I think we can really do something here. I'm going to press for a very large gift for you. And then she called me later that afternoon after the lunch, and she had met with her boss, and he said, let's give BAM $5 million. So I called it the $5 million lunch, and I wanted to order the same food every time I went after that, thinking it might have the same result with some of these donors. So that was the $5 million lunch.
Okay, so you're going to read an
Edward
excerpt,
Albee?
and then we're going to invite Calvin to come and join us for the last question, and then open up questions to you all.
So one of my favorite programs came to fruition in a very unusual way. As you may have gotten the vibe by now, I read everything that showed up on my desk. Brochures, annual reports from other cultural organizations that had BAM on their mailing list, and on and on. Usually I was scanning for fundraising ideas, and I immediately moved straight to the donor list. But for some reason, when a pamphlet arrived from the National Book Foundation, which annually bestowed one of the most important literary prizes in America on worthy authors, I was captivated by the depth and range of their programs. Book clubs were re-entering popular culture at the time, and it occurred to me that BAM and NBF, the National Book Foundation, could create a new type of book club that would draw people together in large numbers to engage over food and drinks with the work of celebrated writers. I proposed that we develop an ongoing series that would include a buffet dinner with live music, followed by a featured author reading from their work, and then an audience discussion hosted by an expert moderator. The evening would culminate with a book signing and sales. In essence, through this program, we would convene a vibrant community around literature, just as we had done around music, dance, theater, and opera. The NBF loved the idea. They had access to some of the most talented writers in the world, and by then, Fort Greene, Brooklyn was ground zero for New York authors and editors, so we were able to mobilize the same literary population that often came to shows at BAM and lived right in the neighborhood to take part in this new kind of programming. Joe Malillo, our executive producer, named the series Eat, Drink, and Be Literary, and the program was an immediate success. The audience capacity was over 250 people per event, and the easygoing format of food, drinks, reading, and conversation radiated with warmth and good humor. There was, however, one event that proved to be a bit tricky, when the often prickly, legendary playwright Edward Albee was our featured guest. Albee wasn't quite buying into this eating and drinking part of the evening. And when I went to bring him up on stage, he informed me in no uncertain terms, Karen, If I hear anyone clinking a glass or silverware, I'm out of here. So before introducing him, I decided, how do you deal with this? I'll just deal with it straight on. My friends, I said to the audience, our guest, Mr. Albee, has warned me. If he hears any clinking of glasses or silver, he is leaving. So please be on your best behavior. Not a clink was heard, and Albee gave a splendid reading. The evening was not over, however, because there was a testy moment during the Q&A when a woman in the audience questioned why Albee had written a sequel to his most famous one-act play, The Zoo Story, when according to her, it was perfect just as it was. Albee was flabbergasted and asked her, "Madam, I beg your pardon, but whose play is it anyway?" She responded, "It's ours now, Mr. Albee. I think it belongs to the public." "Oh, you do you?" responded an increasingly agitated Albee. The debate escalated from there, with the entire audience taking sides. I think the 250 people becoming passionately incensed about the Zoo Story actually appealed to Albee, and I was pretty sure I saw a hint of a smile when he sat down to sign books at the end of the evening.
So I'd like to invite Calvin to join us. BAM really came at a zeitgeist moment in the history of American arts in the 80s and the 70s, where it was the tail end of the peace, love, political freedom moment. So suddenly the arts were given a focus and an importance that America hadn't really experienced before. And BAM really was at the forefront of that, creating the new wave and also, I would say, making headway in diversity before diversity was a thing. And now we're in 2022, and a lot has changed. The landscape has changed, and we're post-pandemic. This is something that we really hadn't experienced since the Spanish flu. And the Spanish flu, in fact, within the first 2 weeks, the opera, speaking of, in New York said, "Oh, it doesn't matter, we'll still run the program." But we're wiser now. So the arts are having to really recover. And there's also been Black Lives Matter. There's a whole lot of important kind of self-questioning, and also, recognizing that the arts has to be for everyone. Which is why, Calvin, also who has a great experience in that arena, is here. So it's really exciting to have the two of you on a stage, because you really were a precursor to that. You are a doer. You're going to bring a new vision to Cambridge, Boston area, and I would suspect more than that. I suspect our country. And so talk to, how do you feel about, what are the steps that are necessary right now in a post-pandemic world?
Why don't you go ahead?
Well, thank you,
Go
Karen.
ahead.
Is this all? Oh, good. So what are the steps? I mean, one of the things that we have been seeing in theaters that we want to get back to making plays. Our art form is one of convening. And what it takes to convene now as opposed to 2 years ago is very different. It's very different for our audiences, for our artists, and certainly our staff that are managing these productions. So a degree of care and I think strategy around how we approach safety and occupational health in the theater and in the performing arts is one of the great considerations I think we have to pay attention to right now. But how we resource our work environments and promote wellness from within is one of the things that I think is really important for us to consider right now.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, the problem with our field is that we never have any money, that that philanthropy is very tough, and I'd like to see us turn that table from philanthropy to investment.
Okay.
And investment happens when people understand that there is a huge upside for their community by making an investment. The arts bring street life and vitality, and now I think that COVID has actually given us a reset moment, that people see what it's like without us. And I'm hoping that this will actually inspire them to do more for our community. I think that we've also seen what great diverse communities are not just great because it's the right thing to do, they're great because it's the most interesting thing to do. I don't think that people come to great cities for everything to be the same. I think that diversity fuels the creative fires and makes the world a more exciting and interesting place. So the more that we can bring diverse voices into our programs, into our audience, into our staff, into our leadership, this is a top-down, bottom-up thing. The stronger our field will be and the more impact our message will have in terms of, of the importance of the arts and what it can do to build community and bring people together.
Absolutely. And I think just carrying that narrative forward is part of the equation, right? Because as you said, a lot has changed since, the past few years, but I don't think a lot has changed. I think our attention has changed. And what we've been able to shift our attention to in a world where we're not doing anything, in a world where things slow down, where things stop completely, that's the attention that we've been waiting for in terms of this catalytic movement towards promoting not just racial diversity, but diversity of accessibility, representation, thinking about this practice of land acknowledgements now that is ever increasing. I think it's about expanding our collective understanding in a way that we've had the opportunity to do but haven't done. So when Karen is talking about how we pivot the focus of philanthropy to some of the things beyond just the programming, beyond just the art, it is how we structure these organizations right now to be leaders and to be sustainable, actually moving forward, that it take more investment. It does take more access. It does take more broadening communities and engagement in ways that we hadn't considered before, because these communities have always been there. They have always been growing. They have just required our attention in a different way.
I agree. I also feel that in the way a city like Boston and Cambridge particularly is really about innovation. I mean, this is a hub of the top, one of the top universities of the world, of many top universities of the world. We're here on the grounds of Suffolk University, which is one of the top universities for its legal minds, for its history. It has a thriving theater program, which is really why we're here. Thank you, Richard. It's interesting to me that in that respect, there really should be a marriage, because the arts is always a new mirror, thrown up to ourselves as a society, and helps on all fronts how to go forward. Star Trek, invented the cell phone before the cell phone was even something, right? So I think there's a real opportunity, as you say, to convey the message that there is, that it's an investment for industry and innovation in industry to meet with innovation in the arts. And we really are, as a community, the perfect petri dish, as it were, to make that happen. So I would like to open the conversation to the audience. If we could have a little bit of lights on here so people don't trip as they get up. There's a mic, I believe it's right over there. You can see it. If anyone had some questions, I'd be very grateful to take them.
Hi, I'm Jim Kaufman. Thank you for coming here. I have two questions, actually. One is for Karen. I'm just curious, how did you sort out your relationship with the Armory and St. Anne's and Lincoln Center? How did you figure out how to divide the territory, so to say? Were there relationships? Did you have ongoing conversations?
Well, we didn't, nothing formal. There's a lot of competition for certain hot shows,
Yeah.
Everyone descends on London, everyone descends on the big festivals, the Avignon Festival, the Edinburgh Festival, and obviously money and the ability to make deals plays an important part. But BAM was out there on the international scene before anybody was really looking beyond what was just happening in New York and in a few places in the United States. So we were the largest international presenter in the country for a long time. And then when Lincoln Center and some of these other places kind of went Eurocentric, we went global. So Joe would fly to Australia for 6 hours, see something, and then come back. It was he called it industrial strength traveling. And it was somewhat insane, but so we kept bringing all these things. And now, of course, the landscape has changed, and you have more institutions that saw. We also ended up having the youngest audience, probably 20 years younger than Lincoln Center, Carnegie Hall at the time, and even still, younger audience, more diverse audience because of the nature of the work that we were doing. And the other institutions got wind of that, and they started programming into the BAM zone. So then we had to continually push the envelope to find ways to make our programs more exciting and relevant. As far as the Brooklyn organizations, there's a pretty tight bond between a lot of the Brooklyn organizations. We're very close to St. Anne's, very close to the Brooklyn Museum. The Brooklyn organizations are different from each other. They're different sizes, and so there's a real camaraderie. As I said, there are 9 institutions in the core of the Brooklyn Cultural District and 55 that surround that. So you have a lot of artistic firepower just right in that area, and everybody is part of an association. The DBAA, I don't remember what is the Downtown Brooklyn Arts Association, something like that. So there's a lot of camaraderie there.
Thank you. The next question is for Kelvin. Welcome. It's great to see a new generation coming in, frankly. I'm a neighbor in Cambridge. Anybody know where Cambridgeport is? That's my home territory. Been there for many, many years. You're going to be building in Austin, across the river, in a big research concentration that is part of the Harvard empire, I'd say, with a lot of science. And I think they want to move some of their graduate programs. Do people know what I'm talking about? And they're going to straighten out those roads and that tangle of stuff out there. It's going to take 30 or 40 years. What are you going to build out there? What are you going to do in Austin?
Fantastic. So
Thank you.
No, thank you, and appreciate it. Good to see you. One of the conversations that I'm being brought in and sort of dropped into is about our next chapter and what the ART becomes in its new home, being a part of Boston. And one of the things that I said in the interview process as I was speaking to the board and the search committee is that you have a real opportunity here that it's unprecedented to not only have a world-class institution that has a history, but to move it about a mile away and have a new campus. So what do you do with that? What do you do with that privilege, that access, and that pivot right now? And one of the concentrations that my colleagues are focusing on is how we promote broader civic engagement in a way that we haven't before. Now being in a new home in Alston, what is it about Alston that we should be tapping into as an institution? Because we're not just building a theater, right? We're building a center. And one of the things that I have seen is that it is a center for performance art and community research. So we're finding the ways to expand what we do beyond simply producing plays to actually talking about programming, thinking about the world in which we're in and how we integrate different experiences for the Alston and Cambridge communities to be a part of. So what we're building, again, is, to me, is a destination, right? Is that as we move and we evolve as an institution from a regional theater to a national center, and one that, again, that continues to provide the work and the outpost and the sort of exchange of arts and ideas in a new way that we haven't done before. And I think being in a new center gives us that opportunity. So those are the conversations we're having. As a unit, some of these conversations have long been had, but I'm sort of stepping in and starting to think about what that next generation will actually need, because that's who this theater is going to benefit. It's not even folks like me. We're thinking decades away from now, the kind of legacy we want to start there. But it begins with that question of civic engagement and what responsibility do we now as a theater have to that Alston community.
Another question?
Yeah, hi. I'm Richard Chambers. I'm the chair of the theater department here. Kelvin. I want to give you a big Boston, I am so wicked happy that you are here. Here, pardon me. Jim said a new generation. It really feels like that. There's so much change going on at ART, and I'm just so excited. I just look forward to what you're gonna do. Karen, when did you come to BAM?
1979.
Oh, goodness, okay. So in 1987, I was a literally, if not starving, then very hungry graduate student at Tisch. And the big event was the Mahabharata.
It's a whole chapter in the book.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I'll just buy a book. But I literally couldn't afford to do anything unless someone gave me comps. And I so wanted to go see that. I just wonder if you could talk a little about...
Did you end up seeing it?
I never did.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, which was just like the heartbreak of my life. But if you could just talk a little bit about the genesis of that project and the whole process of that. Thanks.
I won't tell the whole thing because it's too long of a story, but this was a 10-hour production that Peter Brook created, and it was the most remarkable show that we ever put on stage. It was like a religious experience more than even a theatrical work. And Brook and his writing partner, Jean-Claude Carrière, learned about this piece.
Two more questions.
Okay,
Yep.
so I'll tell this quickly. Brook was doing a show somewhere, and someone came backstage and gave him a piece of paper, and the piece of paper basically had the question on it, that there was an enormous battle for the whole future of mankind, and the two armies of the opposing sides meet each other on a field, and they look at each other and realize that they're cousins. And at this moment, what do? Peter Brook says, what is this story? What is the origin of this? And he finds out that this is the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, I'm boiling it all down, and that is part of a larger work called the Mahabharata, which is 12 times as long as the Bible. He and Carrière became obsessed with the work, and they found an oral historian in Paris, and they went night after night after night and were told this story the way it had been told for centuries. And they absorbed the story, and then they wrote the play. The play was 10 hours long. You'd show up you could either see it in a marathon where you show up at 12 o'clock and got out at 12 o'clock at night. One time we did it where we started at 12 o'clock at night and you got out at 6 o'clock in the morning. Then we broke it into 3 parts where you could see it over 3 nights. Then we did it 10 different ways, but long story short, we ran it for 2 months. It was the most amazing experience. Later, you can now see it it became a film and then a television piece for public television, so you can actually still see it. And it was it was something that was amazing. But the last part of the story was that Harvey wanted to bring it. There's a lot of fundraising involved. I'm not going to go into that now. But Harvey wanted to bring it, and Brooke did not want to do it in the Opera House. It was too nice. It was too beautiful. It was too, formal. And so we looked and looked, and the neighborhood was not in good shape at the time, but on Fulton Street, they walked by an old vaudeville theater, kind of broke in the window, looked inside, and voila, found the old Majestic Theater from 1904 that became the BAM Harvey that you saw on the slide. And if you look at that theater today, it's what I call a state-of-the-art ruin. It looks unfinished, but it was made for the Mahabharata, and then we've used it as a theater ever since, because it has the Brooke aesthetic where the spectator and the performer share the space, the past and the present share the space. So when you're in that theater, all artists love it, audiences love it, because it has this remarkable sense of history and connection. So that was where we ended. So we not only did the Mahabharata, we also got a new theater. And that theater, of course, is with us today. We renamed it in Harvey's honor when he retired in 1999. So it's a great story, and it was a great, it was Brooke at his peak as a theater maker, that piece.
Another question?
Hello, I'm Elliot Haugen. I'm an intern at Stage Source this summer, so I'm just here getting a sense for things. It's amazing to be in this room with you. My question is, so as prices increase to the point where I feel like it's so difficult for artists to live in the major artistic hubs, how can we build out American theater into other cities? And Kelvin, you were talking about this turning the regional into the national with ART, and I guess I was thinking, do you think it's possible that we can build a future for young artists that they can live their vibrant artistic lives outside of the major hubs? Do you think that's possible?
You want to start?
Well, I'm very New York City centric. Yeah. So I hope, Richard, that talked about, I hope that people come, young artists, and do their time in New York and just kind of experience it and feel it and are part of what the energy of that creative community is like, and then go out into the world. Yes, I think that creative neighborhoods can happen everywhere. And the way that I feel that this should catch on is that every neighborhood has something about it that makes it great. And the idea is to go in and find that thing and then blow it out all the way. And then it becomes really exciting. And some places, like in Brooklyn, that kind of edgy maker culture is what came out of the Brooklyn experience. But I see in all the places that I visit that there are different vibes and different things that make that place creative and exciting. And when artists come into these places and catch that vibe and then just, as I say, take it all the way, that's when creative hubs happen everywhere. And that there can be cultural vitality and excitement in the smallest places. Kelvin knows that this is what I did the talk at Yale about, really looking at the lightning round of examples of where the arts has driven and changed neighborhoods in a very positive way, because artists, makers, craftspeople have come and put their creative energy into making that community great.
What's your name?
Yeah, that was excellent. What did you say my name?
Yes.
Elliot.
Elliot?
Yeah.
So Elliot, just so you know, Punctuate 4 Productions does
Yes.
just that. So we're on the North Shore, and we're an incubator where we develop new works because we can do them at a very cost-effective way. And we will nurture a play and do 2-3 productions of it before it's brought to to bear, like in a more commercial way. And it's proven to be a really successful way of, creating new works. So it is possible, and the rents in Beverly are a lot cheaper, and we're around the corner. So definitely
Good to know.
find me and find Calvin.
Okay.
Yeah, so just what I wanted to share with you, Elliot, is
Yeah.
it's always possible.
Yeah.
It's about your ambition and what your intention is. Artists have been doing this for decades, finding their ways. This is how the regional theater movement started, is folks who wanted to get away from the commercial model and the aesthetic of Broadway and create communities centered around their art and their cultural stewardship, right? So we're at this point in the evolution where even those theaters have become mainstream.
Right.
They have become commercial, they have become the BAMs, right?
Yeah.
So now it's time, as a generation of artists, to not think of yourself solely in terms of the one thing you do. You now need to become a chameleon, right? You need to be artist, you need to be author, producer, director, right? Stage carpenter. All of those things have to happen for you to facilitate a new way into presenting and finding your audiences. But it's about scale, right? Not everyone is going to become a BAM or an ART, right? But they're all of these communities, and I think that's one of the things our next generation has to contend with, is we need to take the stigma out of community theater and community artistry, right? And put a commitment back into that. We don't need to become these highly corporatized, four-walled institutions. We need to get back to the ways of storytelling that surround oral tradition, right? That talk about how we share our art democratically in a new way, right? So when you ask, is it possible? It's always been possible. But my hope is that this conversation is happening in new ways with artists that have the same commitment and mission as the one you're describing.
Amazing.
One more
Yeah.
question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Karen, would you have a last remark or conclusion you would like to share with us?
Of course I do. So I'm just going to wrap it up here and thank Kelvin and wish you so much luck in your new role. I know you're going to do great things. Miriam, you're always doing great things. So thank you both for joining me as part of this program tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As you have heard over the years, there were many great and memorable days at BAM, of course, but there were also times of disappointment and hardship. A bad review for a show we loved and believed in, grants that fell through at the last minute, treasured colleagues who left when we needed them most, and of course, government cuts to the arts always clobbered us first. On those days, the hardest days, many nights on my way home, I would stop in the opera house. I would take a deep breath and I would sit alone in the orchestra in the dark. It was peaceful and healing. And then for a moment, I would just close my eyes and try to deal with it all, drift into deep thought with only that lonely ghost light illuminating the vast stage. And then I would sit and I would wait for them, summon them, conjure the great ones across the years and the decades. And they would come to me and inspire me to keep the faith, believe in the crusade, and urge me to fight another day. It was kind of like this.
Che bella cosa, una giornata sola, un'aria serena.
And then it hit me.
Oh, Lord. I know a place, y'all, ain't nobody crying, no,